Hi, my name's Travis Kerr. I'm a member of the North Huntingdon Township Environmental Stewardship Project. Our mission is to inform and support North Huntingdon residents regarding issues that impact their health, safety, and the environment. Recently at the Norwin Public Library, we had an introductory presentation on fracking called Fracking 101, and a presentation by Nick Kennedy from the Mountain Watershed Association. After that, we had a question and answer session with both Nick and myself. We had a bit of a snafu with the camera and we lost the beginning of the presentation, which is why I'm recording a new introduction for you now. Once I get you up to speed on the first couple of slides, we'll toss you back into the original footage from our meeting. Please let us know if this is useful to you though. We're trying to inform as much as possible. A lot of people don't even know what the fracking process is or what it means for residential areas. It is an industrial process. So if this is helpful to you, please let us know. And we'll see what else we can do to get knowledge to you so you understand what's going on. So all that said, I'm going to dive right in. So the reason that I made this presentation was because when I first found out about the fracking in the parks, which I live right next to, I wanted to learn more about the process and see what it was all about, if it was good, if it was bad, what kind of worked. And I had a really hard time finding information and factual based things. There's a lot of information on every side of the issue. It's a multi-sided issue, from politics to environmental to economics. And so I wanted to make something that would allow everybody else to kind of have a good starting base, because if you don't understand the process, everything else is kind of a jumble. It's hard to grab a hold of. So hopefully this will be a tool to get you started. So it's not the end of the conversation, but the beginning. So whenever I first started, I had a couple pretty basic questions, right? What is the drilling and mining process? How does it affect our community and environment? What are the benefits and who gets them? Do I qualify? What are the short and long-term dangers to homeowners and families? Okay, so the first thing that you need to know about fracking is a little bit of history about it, okay? Now, we're not going to go too deep into this because there's a greater conversation to be had, but there's a couple important things to know. The gas and oil industry will tell you that they've been fracking for over 60 years. Now, this is partly true and it's partly not true, so let's look at it. The first hydraulically fracked well was done in the 1940s, but that was for a conventional well with a lot less fracking water and a lot less pressure, and we'll talk more about those. But now they're also doing horizontal wells, which are different than the straight up and down conventional wells. The first horizontal well was drilled in 1991. The chemicals that they use in the water weren't invented until 1996, and these two weren't used in combination until 2002. Another new technology that they've developed are multiple wells going from one pad. This wasn't developed until 2007. And the first well drilled in Pennsylvania was in 2007. So this is new technology, right? Another thing we need to know is that in 1963, the Clean Air Act was passed. It was designed to control air pollution and protect public health. In 1972, the Clean Water Act was passed, and it aims to make all waterways fishable, swimmable, and drinkable. And then in 2005, really recently, the Energy Policy Act was made, and that made oil and gas basically exempt to those previous acts, right? So they don't have to follow the rules that everybody else has to. And that basically means that the process they're using now was illegal to do before 2005. So we're talking about new policies that make this process legal and new technologies. Another thing we have to keep in mind is that historically the oil and gas industry has used subcontractors. That means that the main company isn't always the one doing all of the work for the wells. They're subcontracting out to people to get rid of the waste, to drill the holes, to do the trucking, to do transport, right? So it's not just one company that's been doing it. We're talking about a lot of companies, some with more experience, some with less. Okay, so now let's start into the process, okay? So the first thing is seismic testing. In order to do this, there's two basic ways. They use thumper trucks and dynamite. Now they both are going to work almost in the same way. It's just the thumper trucks work better on flat surfaces, so they'll use those on roads. And then if they need to go off-roading, basically, to rougher terrain, they'll use the dynamite because they can use helicopters to drop that stuff off in more remote locations, and they can do the pulse there. So what they're going to do is create a pulse. like shaking the ground, mini earthquake that's going to go through the rock and then bounce off the rock and come back up to geophones, which allow them to record the depths and what rocks and densities are down there. Now this works basically like sonar, right? We can think about it like sonar in the ocean, only this is into the ground. Only it is using dynamite and causing small earthquakes, so there are some concerns with it, okay? So now for those concerns, we're going to jump back to the actual video, and you'll see that I start talking a lot faster, and that's because we were under a tight time constraint. So I apologize for that, but if this is a more comfortable pace, again, please let us know, and we'll look into making more videos like this. Okay, please enjoy. Now, potential issues. I want to say really clearly that these are potential issues. It's not every time that they do this, it's going to happen, right? These are some things that have happened, and they have the potential to happen, but they're not guaranteed, okay? But if they have happened and they can happen, it's important to know them, okay? So I want to be really clear about that. So, some of the things when you have the thumper trucks on the road is that you have damage to the roads, right? We're shaking the ground, and so we have to worry about underground utilities, as well as building foundations and landslides. The other thing that we have to worry about specifically with the dynamite, and I have to talk about how the process works briefly, is that they'll drill a 3-inch hole, it'll go down about 20 or 30 feet, and then they'll take about a quarter stick of dynamite and put it down in there and detonate it. And that's what gives them the shake, right? So whenever you have that kind of hole with that depth, water from the surface can go down that hole and mix with water under the ground. We're going to talk a little bit later about how water tables work and how that can cause contamination, but that's what that means, that those two can mix, okay? So it's important to have those holes filled. Thumper trucks come in like a line of 3 to 5. You know, obviously each situation is going to be different depending on what they need. They're going to put down this pad in the middle and then create the vibrations that way. Usually those are used on flat surfaces. Dynamite is usually used on terrain that's harder to get to, right? So dynamite's what's going to be used in our parks. So the next stage is pad construction. So the whole point of the seismic testing is find out where the gas is, right? They don't want to drill a hole and then not have it go to the gas because then they've lost a lot of money. So now they know where the gas is, and they're going to start building the pad at the place that's most optimum to get to it. Here we have the size of a pad. It's important to note that they can be, they require, but they can be larger, 5 to 8 acres of land. Now to give you a sense of scale, here's a pad and here's some houses around it. Now there are in the ordinance for the township regulations for how far away those have to be from a house or a structure, right? And the distance is 500 feet. So now that's about a football field and 2/3, or a little over a football field and a half, right? So if you want to know how long it is, just swing up by the high school, look at the football field, 1 2/3 of those, okay? The other thing to keep in mind with the industrial process, right, is that this is going to be going day and night. This isn't just during 9 to 5 hours. They're going to be going all night building. This is with all parts of the process, right? It's going to be a day and night thing, and it's not like downtown Irwin, right? It's not an all-night party. Let's be honest here, okay? So the other thing we have to worry about with, well, not worry about, but no, is that it's not just the drill that's on the pad, right? We're going to have storage tanks, condensing tanks, wastewater pools, idling trucks, other things. So I'm going to talk more about those specifically and why they're important, okay? The other thing, right, is we can have multiple wells on each pad. We talked about that new 2007 technology. Okay, next please. So here we have a picture of a drilling pad, unconventional, horizontal, slick water, fracking pad, okay, right? To make sure we say it's the new technology. Now, as you can see, there's a bunch of different things on each pad, and I want you to go to the next one, please, for a second. This is a different pad. And now we can see that we have a bunch of other things, too, right? So it's important to know that each pad is different. This technology is still being developed. They're still trying to improve it. And so depending on what they're doing at each place, they're going to be trying different things and trying to make it better, right? Or depending on the location, it's going to be a different setup. So we can't say this is the same setup for each well. Okay, so the next step is the drilling, right? So we built a pad, and now we can start drilling. So over here, oh, I gotta get this. I was instructed to point. So over here we have our conventional well. This is the well that we're familiar with, that we have in Pennsylvania and in our area, right? So this is going to get shallow gas, and it's going to come straight down. Over here is our unconventional horizontal well. It comes down, and then it curves, and it's going to follow the shale layer.
So the shale layer is about 100 feet thick, so it can't, if they go directly down to it, they only have a certain amount of space to get it out of. That's why they have to go horizontal, because they can reach more of the gas that way in the rock. It's also important to note, over here we have another graphic illustration of it, but as it goes down through the rock is not going to be like a nice, smooth piece of cheese, right? It's going to be all kinds of different layers of rocks, all kinds of different formations underneath, and they're not necessarily all consistent, okay? As they drill, they're going to use casings, right, to protect the area around them, and we're going to talk more about those later on. And we have a picture of a drill bit. That's kind of the one that they'll use. If you have a lease for gas already, if you have a conventional well, it's important to note that they can come in, if it's concerning the mineral rights, they can come in and do this process with that same lease. Now, there are restrictions in some of the leases that talk about, distance from houses or what can be done. So it's important to check your lease and see if there are restrictions in that kind of way, because they can come in and do the same process with the same mineral rights, okay? Again, you can have more than one well coming out of each one. And then some of the things that we have to worry about with that, right, is we're going to have ground vibration as they go through the ground. And so this is the same kind of stuff we have with seismic testing, right? Underground stuff, shaking of houses, that kind of thing. We're also going to stir up harmful gases. Now, what does that mean? Most of the shale is underneath the layer of coal that we have in the area. Everybody knows we've had coal mining around here, right? So when they go through the coal, there's also gas trapped within the coal, and there's other layers of rock that have the gas in there. So those gases can be stirred up and put into the atmosphere. We also have loud noise, right? So this is going to be going 24/7, loud noise during the drilling. Again, through all stages, we're going to talk about noise and sound. Some of these particles can also be tossed up into the air, and these can be mixed with the underwater water table as well. Again, we're going to talk about water tables, I promise. And then as they're bringing this dirt up, right, the mud itself and the cuttings that come up can have these underground things that are normally safe underground and are coming up, right? And some of those can be radioactive. Some of them can be perfectly normal, and some of them can have these harmful gases in them, okay? So the next step is the fracking part, right? Now, why is fracking important? And this is to stimulate the rock. If they just have the line there and they open it up, not a whole ton of gas is going to come out. In order to get the gas to come out, they have to stimulate it, which means they're going to put a lot of pressure down there and break it. Over here's an illustration of a pipe going through solid granite. And you can see as they get down so far, they're going to actually puncture holes in the pipe once it gets down to the horizontal part, right? Then when they pump the fluid down, and we'll talk about that, it's going to push out of those holes and crack the rock. The important thing to remember about this is that this is solid granite, and we're actually talking about shale. So shale already has a lot of natural faults in it, and the gas is usually within those faults. So it's a very easy to fracture rock, and it can go in a lot of different ways, right? So it's somewhat less controllable than granite. Over here we have I gotta get my thing. There we go. All right, so over here we have an illustration of the pressure as the fluid's being pumped down. The pressure is going to be put on the rock, right? Now it's important to remember that the pressure isn't going to stop where the crack stops. The pressure is going to go beyond that into other rocks. And this can create breaks in the rocks that are containing layers to protect the water. The layers of rock that make water safe now. So if those layers are cracked, then it allows those intermediate layers of gas to travel up and down, as well as if it's lower down. So the crack can go all the way up through. It can be a little crack that can build somewhere right. And we're really talking about tiny, tiny cracks, enough crack for water to go through, for gas to go through. We're not talking about a big sinkhole that's going to eat a house, right? Okay. So some of the potential issues with the fracking. Well, we talked about the stabilizing the rock structure. The other thing to note is this can be repeated 10 times per well, okay? So fracking isn't just a one-time thing. They come in, they frack the well, they get the gas, they're gone. They can do each well up to 10 times to re-stimulate the well and get more gas out of it, right? So let's talk about the water. So this is called the fracking fluid, right? And it's important to note that fracking is like a general term for the industry, right? But fracking really only means the water process. So you have to be careful exactly how you use that word. But the fracking fluid is made up 90% of water, it's 9.5% sand, and 0.5% slick water chemical mix. Now, this mix can vary a little bit, right? Each well's a little different, each situation's a little different. Generally, they'll use 1 to 8 million gallons of water in this mix, right? Now, we're going to have to take that in proportion to those percents, right? Now, most wells are going to be in the middle of this. Most wells aren't going to be 1 million, most wells aren't going to be 8 million. So, around the 3 to 4 range, maybe 5, okay? But what does that mean in proportion to that? So if we had 1 million gallons of water, then this stat here that the tanker trucks is based upon like the standard tanker truck we'll see at the gas station, right, at Sheetz. So I was at Sheetz one day, I went up and I asked them, hey, how many gallons can you put in that truck? So you can have 160 tanker trucks to get 1 million gallons of water. So most wells are generally going to take some more of that, right? If it's 4 million, it's 4 times that. Okay, so we're talking about a lot of trucks, a lot of equipment on the road, and that's the same with the construction process when the gas is being taken out, right? The other thing that we have to think in mind is the sand itself. Now this isn't sand like at the beach. This is fine silica sand. That means that it's 0.5 millimeters across in diameter. Okay, what does 0.5 millimeters mean? It's actually a powder, right? So that means if wind blows, it kicks it up really easily. If it's ingested through breathing, it's known to cause cancer and other serious health problems. Then the slick water mix, right? Why is slick water important? As they're pushing this down into the well, water actually has friction, right? So it slows down as it gets to the bottom, and that's not what they want. They want the most impact, the most pressure at the bottom. The slick water chemicals were developed so that they wouldn't have so much friction going down the well, and it's going to have more impact at the bottom, create more pressure, right? So that's the main purpose of those. There are other reasons that they use them. Some of them are to treat rocks differently, have them break up a little better. Some of them are even just to keep bacteria from developing down in the shaft. But again, we have a real mix here. We can have over 500 chemicals in each mix, right? And what's 0.5%? 0.5% of 1 million would be 3/4 of a tanker truck, okay? So if we times that by 4 or 5, we can have multiple big tanker trucks full of this chemical mix. So when we talk about the quantity, it's important to keep that in mind. Now, this water is pushed down in the well, right? And it works like a spring. They're going to push it down, and it's going to crack open the rock. The sand's going to go ahead and fill in the cracks, and that's what keeps the cracks open so they don't just collapse when the pressure goes away, right? So the sand's holding the cracks open, and under the ground they've got all this pressure. Now, whenever they stop pushing down, the pressure's going to push back, right? Just like a spring. That's what the gas is going to do. That's how the gas comes out. So whenever the pressure is reversed, that means that some of the water is going to come back out. So they're generally going to get about 1/3 of the water back out. Now, it's possible for them to get 20 to 80%, right? But generally about 1/3 is the case. The thing with this fluid, right, when we talk about, can we easily make this stuff at home, can we easily get the sand, that kind of thing, we have to remember that the water that we're talking about is in 2 stages. The first one before it goes down in the well, and the second one after it comes out of the well. So when it's down in the ground, it's going to mix with methane, it's going to mix with carbon dioxide. In Pennsylvania, there's radioactive elements that it mixes with down there and other harmful things. So when it comes back up, it's actually more toxic than when it went back down. We have to keep that in mind when we think about the fluid. Okay, so now we have the fluid coming back up, right? What do we do with this toxic fluid? And so again, we're talking about millions of gallons of it. So there's 3 basic ways they do it. The first one is evaporation ponds. So these are right on your property next to the well pad, or on the well pad, I'm sorry. They're going to take the fluid, they're going to put it in there. The idea is to let the water evaporate out and then take the sludge that's left over, the solid components, and that's trucked to a landfill that's made to deal with toxic things, right? The problem with this, right, is that it's effective. The water does evaporate. What else evaporates? The gas that's in there, the harmful gases, the various other components that can mix with it underground, right? So that's going to go into the air. So we have air pollution coming off of these. It's not just water vapor. So the other thing we have to worry about is that it's not actually required by law for them to have lining. They can just put this right in the soil, dig a hole. Most of them want to keep it contained, right, though, because we don't want to contaminate the soil. So they'll have lining like that, but it's possible for these linings to get tears. Now, if there's a tear in the bottom, it can be a small tear, a big tear. This allows a leak to continue, right, during the whole operation. And until they clean up the pool at the end, they won't really know. So this is one of the ways that soil can be contaminated, or it can get into the water supply, okay? Then after they're done, after they've got the sludge and they truck it off, right, they have 2 options, is that they can, they have 2 options about the sludge, right? The first is they can truck it off, and the second is actually that they can bury it right on your property. If they have the permit to do this, they can, okay? So this is one of the acceptable ways to deal with the sludge. The second way to treat with water, stumbling over words, I apologize, gone so fast. Okay, So water treatment facilities, they can take the water to a treatment facility, it's supposed to be treated and then released into streams nearby, right? The problem with that is we do not have the technology in existence to totally purify hydraulic fracking fluid. The reason for that is because it's mixing with things under the ground, and each fracking fluid is going to have different things in it. So it's really difficult to have one system that's going to clean one thing. That fracking fluid can also be reused in other wells, which means it's been mixed with multiple locations, right? So it's, again, the stuff that comes out that we have to worry about treating is really, really difficult to treat that effectively. There's been cases in Pennsylvania of radioactive elements going through this treatment process, right? Like I said, it can pick up radioactive stuff under the ground. And they treat it and they put it into the stream and they find radioactive elements in people's drinking water. This has happened, okay? The other way, I'm sorry, and it's important to note that the gas and oil industry are not actually required by law to tell you if there's a spill or a leak on your land, okay? Now, most of the time they will. It's a good thing to do, right? But they're not actually required in the regulations to tell you that there's been a tear in the lining or that something was spilled. Okay, so the third way is called the injection well. If you can give me the next one, please. Thank you. So what they can do is they can drill a well similar to a fracking well, right? We've got casing protection, and then they're going to take that fracking fluid and they're going to, with a compressor station at the top, actually pump it down into the ground. Now over here we have the water aquifer on the top and the confining layer. This is what's going to keep the water on top. Again, we'll talk about water tables, I promise. But as the fluids goes down, it's going to be pumped into the rock below that, right? Now we have the same kind of concerns that we did with the fracking process. The rock is going to break. There's an intense amount of pressure coming out in every direction. That includes into the confining layer, so it's possible to have cracks in the confining layer for water and things to mix. The other thing that's been found with this is that we have earthquakes. In Ohio and Colorado, these high pressures under the ground near faults have actually caused earthquakes in the upwards numbers of in the upwards numbers of even 700 in some of the locations, okay? And these are previously where there weren't earthquakes. There was like one in 1800 or something, right? These are dormant faults that are being reactivated. And we're going to talk a little bit later about this, but with this intense amount of pressure, it makes the casing able to, the casing has a lot more stress on it. So we're going to talk about how casings can break, but it's important to know, just like a regular well, the injection wells can have casing problems, and once they break, then that means that things are going to mix with the underground water, right? Okay, did I miss something there? I think we're good. Onward, fracking. Okay, so, I meant flaring. Sorry, onward, flaring. So flaring is the next step of the process. The reason that they flare is that they've created the spring pressure underground, right? So they have all this stuff that's going to come back up. They have to do so much intense pressure down there in order to get a certain amount of gas back up. So they do so much that they actually don't have the technology to cap the well after they've stimulated it underground. If they didn't stimulate it as much, they could. But to get as much gas as possible, they overstimulate it and they can't actually cap it. So they do what's called flaring. So gas is coming up, they can't cap it, and their solution to that is to light it on fire. This keeps it from getting into the atmosphere, right? So this is going to be burned until the pressure goes down enough that then they can cap it and start harvesting the gas. Some of the problems with this we have to keep in mind is clean natural gas that we think about, right? Clean natural gas, the stuff that's used in your stove, that's not what's being burned here. This is unrefined, right? The stuff that you have at your house has been refined and purified. This has all the other things underground that can be toxic, right? It's putting toxic fumes into the air. It can also have little flecks of that fracking fluid come up and the sand too, right? It's being shot up the pipe. Now, as it sorts itself out, right, it's going to be more gas and less of that stuff. But this can continue for a few days to over 6 months, right? Or up to 6 months, I apologize. Now, it also causes a really loud noise and a constant flame, right? Again, this is day and night. This flame's going to be going. Okay, so that's flaring, right? We've got the pressure down, and then next, we have the extraction process, right? Now the gas is flowing, we've got it all set up right, and we've got tanker trucks coming and going to get the gas, right? Now they have to go to a compressor and processing station. This is where the gas is cleaned. It's where it's made into a product that then can go to people's homes, or be piped into a pipeline, right? Now these compression stations, as you can see from the scale, I'm sorry, I got it, okay. We've got a truck right there, right? So you can see the scale of this huge facility. It's a huge warehouse. So we're going to have these tankers going to and from, right? These compressor stations can be right next to the pad. If they're not, that means tankers full of unrefined, more dangerous natural gas are going about the community, right? And then also these compression stations have been known to cause a lot of noise, right? So we've got constant sound going on. Okay, So then after that, right, we've got post-fracking. But I want to pause for a second, right? It's important to remember that we can do frack the well 10 times, right? So we can go there, and then we can go back to the fracking step, and then we can go to the flaring, and then go back to the extraction process 10 times, right? So that's not just the end. It doesn't have to be. Now, post-fracking, the companies are required and do restoration on the site. That means they're going to take all of their stuff, all of their equipment, and they're going to take it away from the area and try to restore it as much as they can. Here we have a complete restoration. Almost complete restoration, and I say that because the tanks are still here, right? And you know, there's debates about how effective it is. If they have to cut down 50-year-old trees, can they plant a 50-year-old tree? Here we can see that the grass is recovering, but it's not as green, right? But we don't know how long this has been, let's be honest. One of the things we have to worry about with this, though, is that the well, they can't pack up the well and take it with them. So the hole is still going to be in the ground with the casing in it, right? Now, they're going to cap the casing, and they're going to cover it up with dirt. One of the things we have to be aware of, though, is that 6.2% of the casings have failed within the first year. And as we go along, we're going to have more fail over time, right? Now I'm going to talk about why. So we have the layers of steel tube, right? So at the top, there's going to be more layers because they're going to have more protection where the groundwater is, and as they go down, when they get to the bottom, the size of the pipe is going to be about 5.5 inches. That's all it bigger is. It's really small, right? So the widest pipe there is probably 10 inches to a foot. And then you have those layers going down. If you can go to the next one, please. So we've got, it's really important to know that we have cement, not concrete, thank you, in these wells. So it has to be a powder and water mix that's going to be put down these really small pieces. But between the pipes, you only have like 1.5 inches, maybe even less, right? Or it could be up to 2 inches possibly, but it's still pretty small for a piece of concrete, or cement. See, I almost said it wrong. Okay, so when it goes down, it's liquid cement. So that means that if one of those gas barriers down at the bottom, not even the layer that they're trying to get gas out of, has gas coming out of it and going up along the pipe, then as they pour liquid down, gas can travel through liquid. So as it hardens, it's going to have those channels in it where the gas is flowing up through. So that's one of the problems that can happen. Another one is over the time, the cement will shrink and the steel will corrode, right? This is a time-based thing. We don't know exactly when it's going to happen, right? But over time, different stresses are going to come into it. So we've got that pressure buildup, right, too. We've got that spring-loaded system. And as they get enough gas out of it, they're going to, at some point, it's going to become non-economical for them. But there's still going to be a little bit of pressure down there coming out. So even though this is capped, pressure is still going to be building up inside there. That's going to put stress on the casing. Ground movement, too. Also, you know, we don't have a ton of earthquakes here, right? But we do have freeze thaw, and you know, other things can come into this. But it's important that ground movement can crack the cement and potentially bend the steel. Next, please. I'm rushing to the end, I promise. Okay. So here we have a little bit of a demonstration. The other thing we have to know is that they can know if they have a good seal along the pipe, but they can't know if they have a good seal along the soil, along the side of the hole that they've drilled, right? There's no way to know if that's a good seal. So gas from these intermediate layers can travel up. Next, please. The other thing to know is that the cement isn't always going to go up to the top, right? They're going to put it in layers where they need it to protect between gas layers and where the water is, but they're not required to have it go all the way to the top. Again, that's a situational thing. Some of them might go to the top too. Okay, water table, I promised, right? So how does a water table work? Basically, it's an underground lake, right? It's going to rain. Water's going to filter down through the soil until it gets to that layer of rock that it can't go through. What kind of rocks might that be? Well, around here it might be clay. Water doesn't easily go through clay. If there's a big layer of it, it's going to stop the water there, and it's going to build up basically like a lake. Now, if you have more water, it's going to go up. Less water, it's going to go down. This water travels underground and goes to streams, right? Over on this other side here, we've got basically a lake. So if you have a big lake or a river, you can kind of get a sense of where the water table is. But keep in mind the water table is actually going to go up, right? Water sticks to things. In your glass, it sticks to the side, right? So if this is contaminated, it moves very slowly underground, not like a river on the top. It can go 2 to 10 inches a year. It goes faster in other places, but we have to keep that in mind. One of the big things we have to know is that this is way deep underground, a lot of stuff there. We actually don't have the technology to fix it if something gets down under there. Experts have estimated we won't even remotely have the technology for the next 50 to 100 years. So if we talk about spills on the surface, in the air, stuff like that, we have a little bit more control over it. If something gets down here, there's no way we can touch it. Next, please. Oh, the other important thing, right? If you have city water, It's important to know that city water comes from wells and underground aquifers, right? Now, it might not be from right where you're at, but that water is coming from some underground aquifer, stream, or lake. Okay, here we have an example of contamination from a factory. It goes down into the water. It's going to mix with somebody's well here, and then it's going to go to the stream. And again, it can move very slowly. So when it's detected here, we can know there's years of it coming along behind that, okay? And then the next one, we have a little example more specific to fracking. So here we have a well, right, in a wastewater pit. So if there's a leak in the thing there, it can go down in. Okay, next please. Real quick summary of the way things can be contaminated, right? So we have the pools that can have leaks. During the process, they might have a little bit of a spill while they're changing pipes. The casing can fail here at the water aquifer. Goes down in the ground. We have the fracking. The fracking can crack stuff, and that can mix with the things in the underground aquifer there. I know I'm talking fast. Next, please. Okay, so here's a real quick summary of the process. We've got the testing, we've got the pad construction, drilling, fracking, flaring, extraction, and then we can go back again, right? 10 times. And then we've got the post-process. Next, please. Now, these are the summary of things we have to worry about, right? We've got the roads. If something gets in an underground aquifer, we don't have any real remediation. We've got the toxic tankers on the roads driving next to you. We've got, if there's a spill, it can get into the soil. We've got stuff in the air, right? There's always stuff being released into the air. It's important to note, though, here, these are the same tank. This is with an X-ray camera from one of the EPA studies. I'm sorry, X-ray, infrared camera. As you can see, with the naked eye, we can't see all the emissions that are coming off, okay? We've got vibrations, we've got light, and we've got noise. Next, please. Okay, so how real is this, though, right? Some of this can be scary stuff. Is this really real stuff we have to worry about? Here's a couple stats about our state that we can know. So, in our state, there's been over 100 confirmed cases of water contamination in the past 5 years. Here's some stats from 2010 and from 2011. You can see we have a consistent 6.2 failure rate in the casings of those wells. That's 1 in 20. Here we also know that with the pressures that the casings are going to be under, they're going to fail more over time. And it's important to note that these are leases we're dealing with. When the gas company is done, they're going to leave. And like when you check out of an apartment, you have your checkout with the landlord, and then you're gone, and you're no longer responsible. So who's going to be responsible for these casings and underground wells whenever all the fracking is done? Okay, and again, we talked about the remediation. Next, please. Whew. All right. So then, regulations, right? In Pennsylvania, we don't have regulations in place for water well construction standards. Other states do. This means that we're more susceptible to our water wells and our drinking water being contaminated, right? We don't have standards in place. Each one can be constructed a little bit differently. The DPA is also only now revisiting its regulations, right? Again, this is a new process developed in 2007. Research is still going on about what it does and the things it affects. Now, when we talk about the fines, right? It is regulated. There are problems. There are things that happen to you if you do stuff wrong, right? Over here, these numbers are for the entire oil and gas industry in Pennsylvania. 2010, you've got 2.7 million, right? I won't see the other ones. I don't have 2012. That's why I didn't put it up here. I'm not going to lie to you about a number. So I don't have it. That's why it's omitted, not on purpose. Well, I guess it is on purpose if you... Anyway, okay, so 3 years, right? We have $7.8 million in fines for the entire oil and gas industry. Now, the estimated profit from one gas well, this isn't the 6 wells on each pad, this is from one well on one pad, is $11 million. Now, if we think about if we are driving down the road and we're going to work, right, and we could get there faster if we sped, then we know we could get a fine, right? We could get a big hefty fine, we could lose points on our license, right? That stops us from doing that, and that ultimately makes the road safer, although sometimes we do want to go faster, and we'll admit it, right? But in this case, how effective is this deterrent, right? So if one well can pay for the entire fines for the industry for over 3 years, and on the previous page we saw how many wells are drilling each year. In Pennsylvania, there's over 5,000 wells right now. How effective is this really in saying we don't want you to really spill? Okay, also the DEP, like I said, they're not required to tell you when spills happen. Last year, 2013, they only publicly announced 3 of 135. Next, please. All right, so real quick, I said in the beginning one of my questions was who benefits, right? Now this is a greater conversation, this is a small summary, okay? So we do have cash gain, right, for township and individuals. And let's keep in mind, this could be a big number, right? It's a pro. We're going to get temporary jobs in the area, right? They do have to do the short-term restoration for the area. We're going to have, wear and tear on roads, right? But they're willing to pay for that. We could potentially get cheaper gas on your land if you're leasing your land, but that's not for the community as a whole. The community as a whole will be on the national market, right? And if they drill here or not, we're a drop in the bucket for the national market. So our price isn't going to change if it's not on your property. Right, some concerns, right? Property value loss. It's been shown in several studies that property on or near the well goes down, right? There's also the possibility, trying to be totally honest with you here, that it can go up a little, right? If you have well water, it's more likely to go down. If you have city water, it's likely to go up or stay there a little bit. But overall, if you look at the mean average of everything, property value has gone down. And in some cases, the money that you get from the gas industry isn't enough to compensate for how much your property value goes down. Now, banks know that there's some problems with this. They're not willing to give mortgages to the people who have it on their property or the neighboring property. So if your neighbor puts one on their land, it's important to know that you might have trouble selling it. Homeowners insurance is not going to cover the problems with this, right? You have to look at your homeowners insurance. Each one's different. But look at the exceptions thing. Do they deal with wells, right? A lot of them do not. The gas companies aren't liable for the long-term stuff. So again, we have those holes in the ground. We've got public health issues. We talked about these ones, right? We're going to have the stress on the roads during the time, right? So they are going to fix them at the end. But who's going to fix the axles that need realigned? Axles, is that right? Wheel realignment? I'm sorry, it's been a while since I got mine done, right? Obviously I should. Okay, so we also have those trucks going on the road next to you. Next, please. Okay. So then I had my second round of questions, right? After I kind of learned that process, which now hopefully you know. What can I do to protect my property, health, and family? And what was approved in my community? So thank you. I know it was really fast. I hand it off to Mary.